Hello everyone, this is Miss Collins, and this week we're going to be continuing measurement. Last week with Miss Wood, you focused on the system of measurement called U.S. customary, which is used only in the United States. The other system of measurement that is used in the United States as well as the rest of the world is called the metric system. So we're going to be looking at the same things that can be measured that you looked at last week. So we talked about last week that you can measure the length of things, such as your bedroom. You can measure the weight or mass. They are very similar to each other. Weight is simply how much the object weighs, whereas mass is the amount of matter that an object contains. So you can measure the mass of a bag of apples, which would be very much like measuring the weight. And you can also measure the capacity of a container, which means how much can that container hold. So you could measure the capacity of a carton of milk. When we focus on length for today, you're going to be looking at measuring the distance from one point to another. So you could measure the distance from Chicago to Denver, how far it would be between those two places. You can also measure things such as a picture frame. When you are measuring, it is important to make sure that you always include the unit that you're measuring in. If we look at this statement, the can of soda measures 12. We don't know what they measured here. Did they measure the length? Did they measure the weight? Did they measure the capacity? We don't know because they did not include a unit. So it's always important to include the unit. So for this, they could have measured that the length is 12 centimeters or that the capacity is 12 ounces. When you're looking at a ruler, such as the one that you see here, and the ones that Miss Wood showed you last week in her video, she pointed out that this ruler contains inches and centimeters. I know it's a little difficult to see, but inches would be the smallest measurement of length in U.S. customary, and centimeters is the metric system of measuring. And you have both of those on the same ruler so that if you need to measure inches, you have it there. If you want to measure the same thing to see how many centimeters, you can do that with the same ruler. So for metric length, again, we're measuring the distance between one point and another. And the units that you will use for that is millimeters, centimeters, meters, and kilometers. That goes from smallest to largest. So the small of those is millimeters, and the biggest of those is kilometers. So now let's close your eyes and try to visualize how big a millimeter is. When you think about a millimeter, if you hold your finger out where you can see your fingernail, a millimeter is about how thick your fingernail is. Not how wide, but how thick. So it's very small. A centimeter, if you hold up your pinky finger, which is your smallest little finger on your hand, and you look at how wide your pinky finger is, that's about 1 centimeter. When we think about a meter, if you have a doorway that you can see right now in your house, that doorway is probably about 1 meter wide. And a kilometer is about the distance of 11 football fields lined up in a row. So you'll have to close your eyes to think about that one, to imagine 11 whole football fields lined up, one right after the other. That would be about a kilometer. So when we looked at that ruler, we saw centimeters, but you also saw smaller lines in between the centimeter lines. Those are called millimeters. So those are the smallest. So if we could look back at that ruler, there would be 10 little marks between the 0 and 1 centimeter, and that would show the millimeters. There would be 10 millimeters for 1 centimeter. Then if we had a meter stick, there would be 100 centimeters on that meter stick, which looks a lot like a yardstick. And then to measure a kilometer, we would have 1,000 meter sticks to make 1 kilometer. So those 11 football fields that we talked about, you could line up 1,000 meters for each of those, and that would make a kilometer. Okay, so when we're looking at metric length, we're thinking about a paper clip. Remember we said millimeters are the smallest, then centimeters, then meters, then kilometers. So if I wanted to measure this paper clip, would I want to measure it in millimeters, centimeters, meters, or kilometers? Probably centimeters. Yep. So if I use centimeters, would it be the best to say that this paper clip is 1 centimeter? So about 1 width of your pinky finger? Or 3? Yep, 3 would be the correct answer. So this paper clip would measure about 3 centimeters. Alright, think about a pool in your backyard. Yep, we would measure that pool in meters. And would that pool be about 18 meters, so about 18 of your doorways? Or 200 meters, so 200 doorways lined up together? Probably about 18 meters would be correct. Alright, let's think about measuring the distance from Seattle, Washington to Austin, Texas. So Seattle, Washington is the top left state, so all the way to the west of the United States, and the top of the United States is where Washington is located. And Texas is about in the middle. It's the big state about in the middle of the United States, all the way at the bottom. So if we're measuring from Washington to Texas, what unit do you think we should use to measure? Yep, kilometers would probably be the best. And do you think that it would be 340 kilometers or 3,400 kilometers? That's a long distance between those two states. Probably 3,400 kilometers would be the best. Alright, if I want to measure a tick, now this tick is pretty big on this slide that you're looking at, but if you think about a real tick that gets on you sometimes when you're playing outside, would you want to measure that in millimeters, centimeters, meters, or kilometers? Yeah, probably millimeters because they're pretty small and sometimes you have a really hard time seeing them. And would you want to measure, or would you say that 1 millimeter or 11 millimeters is the best to measure that tick? Yeah, probably about 1 millimeter. Usually they're, or 11 millimeters, usually they're bigger than just the width of one fingernail. So that is our metric length for today. Remember, when you are measuring metric length, you're using centimeters, millimeters, meters, and kilometers. See you next time.